Good morning and welcome. Our first speaker today will be Alan Hale.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Alan Hale with General Motors as our accessibility strategy manager today. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us. Just really quick, General Motors, we're committed to accessibility and equity in the future of transportation, and this event is really an expression of that towards our zero mobility future. I want to turn things over to Ray Kadri, and we'll pivot there.
Great, thanks so much, Alan. And it's great to have General Motors as a partner on this very important topic. I'm Rod Kadri, and I head up Ontario's Autonomous Vehicle Innovation Network at OCI. It's my pleasure to serve today as your host. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land in which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. We ask you that you make sure that you're muted unless you're speaking. Competition, we invited post-secondary students across Ontario to pitch their solution to accessible mobility challenges by the way of a challenge statement. The objective of this competition is to raise awareness about the mobility barriers that face physically challenged individuals and the elderly, and to motivate students and researchers to identify and work on innovative, user-centric solutions, further empowering individuals to handle the mobility barriers they may be facing. For today's agenda, we have some fantastic speakers lined up who will shed the light on different accessible mobility topics. And of course, we are excited to hear that, that each of the student teams finalists pitch their solutions. So we're excited to hear their pitches. I'm now pleased to turn it over to the Ontario Minister of Transportation, Minister Mulroney, and the Ontario Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, Minister Fedeli, for their opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network and General Motors Canada for co-hosting this important competition. This pitch-off is a great way to develop innovative solutions to break down the mobility barriers for seniors and people with disabilities. Under Premier Ford's leadership, our government is committed to building a future-proof transportation network that is inclusive and barrier-free, where people can fully participate in their communities. Making Ontario a place where communities and businesses are accessible for everyone benefits us all. Some of the actions we're taking to create a barrier-free Ontario include developing a framework for transportation access and inclusion that will help ensure every individual is reflected in the province's transportation decisions. On our provincially operated transit systems, GO Transit and Up Express, all buses, trains, and most stations are accessible, and we continue to make great progress on that front. In addition, all provincial transit funding programs require that any transit vehicle purchased with provincial funding must be fully accessible. And as our government embarks on the largest transit expansion in Canadian history, accessibility features will be built into the design of our new vehicles, stations, and transit lines. The province also supports transportation services for people, including seniors and those with disabilities, through the Community Transportation Grant Program, which funds services in communities with limited or no transportation options. A lot of work still needs to get done to make our existing transportation network better. Making transportation accessible in Ontario is a task that cannot be completed overnight or alone. It takes time and collaboration between many partners. Competitions like this support our collaborative efforts to remove barriers for seniors and people with disabilities. Countless new and emerging technologies are set to change the way people get around. This is a pivotal time to reimagine mobility and develop innovative accessibility solutions. As our government works to build a stronger transportation system, the ideas that you bring forward today could help people across the programs and services they need to stay healthy and remain connected within their communities. Because identifying, preventing, and removing barriers for people with disabilities creates an Ontario that is built for everyone. I want to thank the panel of judges for taking time out of their busy schedules to participate in this competition. And I also want to wish the best of luck to all of the students and researchers presenting their ideas today. Each of you should be so proud of yourselves for pushing forward the positive change Ontario needs to promote the rights and well-being of seniors and people with disabilities. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to welcome all of you to today's Accessible Mobility Pitch-Off competition. And thank you to everyone at the Ontario Centre of Innovation and General Motors Canada for making this day happen. Our government is committed to an inclusive and barrier-free transportation network that allows people to get from one place to another safely, independently, confidently, and seamlessly. Today's online challenge is an important step toward a zero barrier future for people with disabilities and seniors. It's also an important step forward toward the future of Ontario's mobility sector. Last December, our government launched the exciting Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network, or as we call it, OVIN. This $56.4 million flagship initiative will rally and support Ontario's talent, supply chains, innovators, investors, startups, SME, and global leaders towards a shared goal, and that is becoming a global center of innovation excellence in the automotive sector. It's the next step in our government's Driving Prosperity Auto Plan. Phase 2 of that ambitious plan, which we announced last November, underscores our government's continued commitment to building the auto industry of the future right here in Ontario. We're here today to inspire and motivate you to help build that future by identifying and working on innovative solutions to empower seniors and people with disabilities. Your innovative ideas will play an important role in cementing Ontario as an innovation powerhouse and helping our province recover economically from the global pandemic. Partnerships like this one with GM Canada are an important part of the innovation equation. Through OVIN, our government will continue to invest in Ontario's innovation ecosystem and support partnerships like this. By collaborating with industry, post-secondary institutions, and our government, OCI has been a key partner in supporting the development, commercialization, and deployment of Ontario-made solutions and technologies. Good luck to everyone participating in today's challenge. Your innovative ideas celebrate something Premier Ford likes to call the Ontario spirit, and you will help us build a more accessible, inclusive, and prosperous province. Thanks again to everybody.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Ruby, and I'm the Sector Manager for OVIN at OCI. And I have the pleasure of moderating today's presentations. Our first presentation will be from the Canadian Transportation Agency on accessible transportation for persons with disabilities. This will be a 10-minute presentation with 5 minutes after the presentation for Q&A. I'd like to ask the audience to please type your questions in the chat box, not the Q&A box, and we will address them following the presentation. I'd now like to welcome Sabitha Rajan, Senior Analyst, Centre for Expertise for Accessible Transportation at the Canadian Transportation Agency, to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everyone. As Dan mentioned, I work for the Centre for Expertise for Accessible Transportation at the Canadian Transportation Agency. I'm very excited to be here today to witness this innovative challenge and to see what comes out of this, because we are very much invested in federal accessible transportation. To speak about the agency, for those who don't know, can you move this slide to the next one, please? Okay, for those who don't know, the CTA is Canada's longest standing independent regulator and tribunal. We've been around since 1904. Yes, that makes us close to 120 years old. Our accessible transportation mandate dates back from 1988, which makes us responsible for ensuring persons with disabilities have access to Canada's national transportation network by removing undue barriers. Next slide, please. The CTA's jurisdiction extends to all federally regulated transportation service providers, air carriers, rail, interprovincial buses, ferries, terminals associated with these modes of transportation. We also have jurisdiction over CATSA and CBSA. Our disability mandate, to speak of our mandate, Next slide, please. One of our core mandates is to protect the right to accessible transportation for persons with disabilities by removing undue barriers. Transportation service providers are required to ensure up to the point of undue hardship that barriers to persons with disabilities are removed and they have equal access to the federal transportation network. We wear two hats to fulfill this mandate. As a regulator, our role is to make accessibility-related regulations, and as a tribunal, our role is to resolve accessibility-related disputes between travelers with disabilities and transportation service providers. Next slide. So why is transportation accessibility so important? There are two core arguments for incorporating accessibility into any transportation planning. First and foremost, basic decency and protecting the human rights of persons with disabilities. And second, return on investment. Globally, 1 in 5 people has a disability. As the population ages, this proportion will increase. Accessible transportation is a human right that reflects the fundamental principles of equality, inclusion, and dignity. Barriers that make it difficult for persons with disabilities to travel hinders their full and equal participation in society. When we make a commitment to removing these barriers and act upon it, we don't just reap the rewards of knowing we did the right thing, we also reap profits. The return on investment when we improve accessibility is real and sustained. So designing and building for accessibility and including accessibility into planning policies and practices is a win-win for all. No person should be left behind because of barriers that can be eliminated. Moving to the next slide. During our many interactions with members of the disability community through our stakeholder engagement, including with our Accessibility Advisory Committee, and also through the complaints filed with the agency, we hear about barriers first faced by persons from a cross-section of disabilities, most common of them being a physical environment that's not accessible, communication barriers, such as important and relevant information not being provided in accessible formats, lack of assistive technology that can enhance a person's ability to participate in society, such as navigation apps that assist in wayfinding or hearing loops that help persons with hearing aids, attitudinal barriers, where people focus on a person's disability rather than on the individual's abilities, making assumptions and denying people with disabilities the right to receive services in a manner that respects their dignity. Services, systems, and policies that are either non-existent or create additional barriers, and these could result from systems which were put in place without consulting with persons who are affected by them, or simply lack of appropriate training in the delivery of service. Finally, and in the case of air travel, the challenge of traveling with mobility aid, which can be too large to fit in the cargo hold or could be delayed, damaged, or lost during travel. So moving to the next slide, what is the CTA doing to advance accessibility? In addition to long-standing accessible regulations and codes of practice, the CTA enacted the Comprehensive Accessible Transportation for Persons with Disabilities Regulations, the ATPDR, which came into effect in June 2020. These regulations were put in place to address these barriers in transportation and to ensure a more consistent travel experience for persons with disabilities and create an even playing field for transportation service providers through consistent standards. The ATPDR required transportation service providers under CTA's jurisdiction to take certain measures to ensure federal transportation is accessible, that travel for persons with disabilities is as seamless as possible. The ATPDR set out how to communicate with travelers with disability, what help to give travelers, such as assistance with wayfinding, baggage, wheelchair assistance. They set out how to make terminal buildings accessible, how to make planes, ferries, trains, and buses accessible. The ATPDR also required CATSA and CBSA to make security screening process accessible. For example, prioritizing the screening of persons with disabilities if needed and ensuring accessible signage and communication. The regulations also require all transportation service providers to train their workers to help travelers with disabilities and to consult with persons with disabilities in the development of training programs. The ATPDR required transportation operators to accept a person's mobility aid as priority baggage at no extra charge, provide a space for it as needed, and arrange for repairs or replacement aid and reimbursement expenses if the aid is delayed, damaged, or lost during travel. Going to the next stage, we can talk about some more challenges of mobility aids. Now, while the regulations address various accessibility aspects of accessibility, some challenges remain, and traveling with mobility aid is one of the issues we frequently hear about. A traveler's mobility aid or other assistive device is essential to their independence, safety, and comfort during travel. It can cause a major setback to their travel plans if they're unable to travel with it, or if it is delayed, damaged, or lost when arriving at their destination. But wheelchairs have become larger and heavier, more technologically sophisticated, more customized to users, and often are not designed with air travel in mind. A carrier may not be able to accept a mobility aid for various reasons, such as the weight or size of the mobility aid, because it cannot fit into the door of the cargo compartment, or because it has batteries that are considered unsafe to travel with. And when they are carried, mobility aids can be damaged during transport. So in 2018-19, the CTA established an international working group composed of airlines, persons with disabilities, aircraft manufacturers, mobility aid manufacturers, ground handlers, and regulators from other jurisdictions, with the objective to identify concrete options to address issues related to safe storage and transportation of mobility aids during air travel. The working group produced a mobility aids and air travel report, and one of the short-term actions from the report was the creation of a mobility aid passport that would include information on the bearer's mobility device, such as make and serial number. It could be used by all airlines, leading to consistent practices and hopefully fewer cases of damaged or misplaced wheelchairs. And following one of the recommendations in the report, the CTA, the National Research Council of Canada, NRC, and Transport Canada have undertaken a more in-depth research and analysis on the securement and containment of mobility aids in the cargo compartment. The goal is to reduce damage to mobility aids during air travel. To speak of a few other initiatives by CTA, we have a standing accessibility advisory committee that we consult with regularly, whether we're making regulations or codes of practice, and we meet as specific groups to address such specific issues. It includes nearly 40 representatives from the community of persons with disabilities, the transportation industry, and other interested parties such as the Human Rights Council and CSA group, Transport Canada. We've published a great deal of guidance, including training videos and a best practices guide to help transportation service provider personnel in their interaction with persons with disabilities and to support compliance with their regulatory requirements. On our website, our guidance is available in multiple accessible formats, including HTML, PDF, as well as videos in American Sign Language and Quebec Sign Language. CTA has, next slide please. CTA has recently published the Accessible Transportation Planning and Reporting Regulations. This is required by the Accessible Canada Act, and the ATPRR requires transportation service providers to develop accessibility plans in consultation with persons with disabilities, set up a feedback process, and finally, publish reports, progress reports that provide updates on the progress of their accessibility plans and the feedback they receive. In concluding my presentation, based on our experience at the CTA, I'd like to note some key components for everyone's consideration to a comprehensive strategy for advancing the objective of accessible transportation. The first, and one that perhaps frames all the others, is the adoption of a universal accessibility lens. This means, quite simply, actively considering at every stage how equipment, facilities, and services can be made accessible to the largest number of people possible without the need for individual accommodations. While individual accommodation may always be necessary at some point, it should be an exception rather than the rule. Secondly, the accessibility lens should be applied at the design and planning stage. Barriers arise when the full range of human needs is not taken into account when equipment and facilities are designed, built, and retrofitted, and when services are planned and delivered. If those needs are properly considered and addressed at the development stage, barriers disappear. Transportation equipment are in service for several years. For example, the average lifespan of a commercial aircraft is approximately 20 years. Retrofits can be expensive and even simply impossible. So we need to plan for accessibility, design for accessibility, build for accessibility, train employees for accessibility, and this has to be done from the get-go. Accessibility cannot be an afterthought. The next component, and I would say it's an imperative component, is consultation with persons with disabilities from initiation to completion of any project or policy, an ongoing dialogue, as no one understands the challenges and barriers they face and how to address them better than people with a lived experience. So please consult, consult, and consult. As the disability rights community often says, nothing about us without us. Another judicious strategy is sharing of best practices amongst various stakeholders. As we all know, what works or did not work in one situation may be equally applicable to another, and it makes absolute sense to not spend valuable resources on reinventing the wheel. And the final component is having clear and detailed rules and standards that provide consistent experience for persons with disabilities and provide clarity and set an even playing field for the transportation industry. And this is where regulators have a role to play. As a regulator and as a tribunal, it is of great interest and benefit to the CTA to be aware of innovations and solutions related to the transportation accessibility. So I'd like to thank OVIN and OCI for the opportunity to participate in this event. And I'm very excited to see the solutions coming out of this picture. Thank you very much and best of luck to all the participants.
Thank you, Sabitha, for that highly informative presentation. We do not have time for Q&A at the moment, unfortunately, but Sabitha, would we be able to share your presentation with the audience?
Well, absolutely. And my email address is also listed on the one of the last slide. So anyone feels they need to ask a question, they have any questions, please free to send us an email at that email address. We'll be happy to respond to it.
Perfect. Thanks once again, Sabitha. I'd now like to introduce our second session, Disability Inclusion in the Automotive Industry, presented by Alan Hale, Accessibility Manager at General Motors USA. This will also be a 10-minute presentation, followed by a 5-minute Q&A from the audience. If you do have questions, please enter them in the chat function. Please take it away, Alan.
Thank you, Dan, and thanks again to both OVIN and OCI for hosting today. Next slide, please. So really quick, I'll go through kind of my brief introduction and then really talk about who are people with disabilities and maybe some of the stigmas we have in the workplace around that. But then where it's a business advantage for disability inclusion. So looking ahead at how General Motors is looking to our future of accessible mobility. And then I don't give these talks without leaving people with homework. So I've got some ideas here at the end of how you can engage with General Motors and the automotive industry and help us move things forward. And then we'll move to questions. Next slide, please. So quick intro for me. I've helped start a new department here at General Motors called the Accessibility Center of Excellence. And I'm kind of employee number 1 there as the Accessibility Strategy Manager. We're up to 3 now, so news to come on that. I used to be in connectivity as a background, working on cellular connectivity and autonomous vehicles. And I really found my passion in where accessibility was entering the autonomous vehicle domain. And I saw a big opportunity there to help push things further. I also serve as the GM Able Vice President. So this is our employee resource group for people with disabilities at GM. And I'm a disability rights advocate outside of work. So I sit on the Michigan Disability Rights Coalition and some others. And you can see pictured here is my passion in this space. My partner, who's a manual wheelchair user, I also have chronic nerve pain as a connection to disability myself. Next slide, please. So when we look at disability inclusion, when we look at inclusion as a whole, it's not just the right thing to do, but it's also something that makes sense for business. And it's something that several groups have studied through the years. And we know that companies that focus on inclusion, they're more likely to hit their financial targets. They're 3 times more likely to have high performers. They're 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile. And they're 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. And there's some lens on disability I'll go into in just a moment on that. Next slide, please. This is one of the most powerful quotes I think I've seen emerge lately, where after the events in June of 2020, GM really adopted a value to be the most inclusive company in the world. So we have support from Mary Barra, our executive leader, and this quote has always resonated with me, where we aspire to be the most inclusive company in the world, but it's not a title we want to hold by ourselves. And that says a lot of things. It mainly says we have to work with partners and we have to work with our communities to get there. And as someone who's also a community advocate, this was music to my ears at General Motors, where we can really bring our passions into work, build this community of inclusion, and ultimately work to change our industry. Next slide. So just a real quick moment of empathy, and this is a small exercise. If everyone could just close your eyes for 10 seconds and really just think of what is your experience with disability, whether it's yourself, whether it's your family, whether it's a parent or a child. Maybe it's the time you broke your leg in the 3rd grade, but hold on to that as I continue to talk through this. And hopefully you'll find that you're not alone in experiences. Next slide, please. So who are people with disabilities? And often we see disability as a minority and as an extreme edge case when we look at use cases and products and services, but really people with disabilities make up the largest minority group in the world. So it's over 1 billion people across the globe. And often our minds maybe jump to the motor disability category as the main representation there, because it's the one we see signs for often when we go to park. It's one we see for restrooms, but really disability is such a broad topic, spanning cognitive disabilities, vision, and including blind and low vision disabilities, auditory disabilities such as deaf and hard of hearing, and speech disabilities. There's so many more not listed, things like chronic pain and others. This topic is just so broad. And then added to that are temporary disabilities. So it's the really difficult number to track because they're temporary, but that compounds every year. And then we have to talk about the caregiving population. It's the people who are closest to people with disabilities, and it's the caregivers. And that's also in the US, we've got it measured to be over 20% of our population. And that's significant as well. And then I think that the AARP in the US has labeled the term the silver tsunami, where we have a population over 65 is set to double by 2050. And we know disability also correlates heavily with age. So is our infrastructure and our products and services really ready for that amount of people is something we need to start thinking of. And all that's to say, this piece of intersectionality is maybe one of the most important, is disability has no boundaries. And it often, when we talk about disability through the lens of race and other segments, sometimes disability is more prevalent due to other inequities in our systems. But it's also something that for each of us, we're all kind of temporarily abled, and the chance of experiencing disability in your life is really high. So that also just drives to this importance, where when you design for accessibility, you're not only designing for everybody, but you're designing for yourself. Next slide, please. So really quick, when we talk about inclusive design, and there's a lot of different angles to take this, but when we talk about inclusive design, it's really taking and embracing the hardest challenges and designing around that, and then finding universal benefit after the fact. So the phrase we've picked up in this space is when you design for the edge, you get the middle for free. And it's really by designing for and by people with disabilities, you build brilliant products and services that then the friends and family to those people are also eager to jump on. And then you find this access to the broader market after that, where often the products and services designed in this way benefit everybody. One quick example are voice assistants. If you can imagine the last decade without the transformation voice assistants have brought into our lives, this is something that was an assistive technology that grew out of a lot of government research and then was picked up by some major companies and really transformed the world we live in today. Next slide, please. So all this is to say, this is, again, a really studied benefit around accessibility. There's an amazing study from Accenture called the Disability Inclusion Advantage that I encourage everybody to go out and find, because you often get asked about what's the business case for focusing on accessibility, and they've proven it out. Revenues are 30% higher, net income is 100% higher, and profit margins are 30% higher for the top companies that focus on accessibility as a business domain and a business objective. So the message is clear that there's an opportunity here to not only do the right thing, but also where it makes sense for a business to embrace it. This market's also massive. Again, it's over 1 billion people in the world. It's quantified as potentially an $8 trillion global market. And that extends to the directly people with disabilities, but then also the caregivers and loved ones and friends who make their purchasing decisions around them. Next slide, please. So what can you do for disability inclusion? And this is where whenever I give these talks, I try to give some homework. So next slide, please. The biggest kind of milestones General Motors celebrates through the year, and this is through the lens of our employee resource group, has helped compile this, is in May, we have Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And this is usually the third Thursday of every month. I think I have heard this is transforming into a month-long activity, but this is where we really celebrate digital accessibility. And then in July, we have another holiday that many of these are maybe US centric, but they're transforming into global through the lens of business. But we have Disability Pride Month in July. And this is both a celebration of when the US passed ADA, but it's also building on what's been globally recognized as Pride Month in June, really carries through to July through that intersectionality between the LGBTQ community and disability. And it's something that's really starting to pick up. So that's one of our most fun months at General Motors. And then from the employment perspective, we have Disability Employment Awareness Month in October. Again, the US is centered there, but it's something that we're working to spread globally as well to raise visibility and awareness on employment and work satisfaction for our employees with disabilities. And then the really exciting one we went hard on this last year was in December, is International Day of Persons with Disabilities on December 3rd. And that's a UN sponsored holiday that is also amazing to see what General Motors is doing around the globe. Next slide, please. So how to get started, and often this is difficult, especially in the automotive industry. Historically, we're an older industry, so a lot of our facilities were built before we had building code to support accessibility. And a lot of hiring practices rooted in manufacturing are often hard to do. So again, this goes back to you're never alone in this space. So how to get started is there's an amazing global organization called the Disability Inclusion Network. And that's something GM has partnered with. And they have a tool called the Disability Equity Index. And it's acknowledging that this is a process. When we first took it, GM, we did not get a perfect score when we first took it in 2015, but we then really sat down as a business, looked at our systems, and identified where we can start improving things in getting leaders across our business, all the way from talent acquisition to facilities to our product, to start looking at how can we do better. So we're proud to say for the last 6 years, we've gotten a 100, which by no means is a perfect score, but it means we're doing the right things and we're evolving with the movement of disability inclusion. Something too, I know there's a lot of students on the call. This is a group that's open to students. They offer a program called the Next Gen group. And this is a way for students to find mentors with disabilities and ultimately find job opportunities through that program. So Next Gen is something GM's really proud to be a part of. I'm also serving as a mentor in that as well. And it's a great system. I like to read a lot, and there's no shortage of great books on disability inclusion. But two really have stood out to me. Mismatch by Kat Holmes is a great read to understand inclusive design. There are even a few chapters there on the history of Detroit and the history of the automotive design. So there's some great lessons there to learn about where historically we've really centered on designing for the average, but you often get something that's unusable by most folks when you design for the average. So learning what inclusive design is and how to include people with disabilities in your process is really vital. And I found this book to be really mind-opening. And then the other one, it's a newer book called Demystifying Disability. And I find often people are afraid to engage in disability inclusion or talk about accessibility in our products because they just don't know how to talk about disability. If you're not comfortable even saying the word, it's something that's hard to really drive into product. So this is an eye-opening book. It's a very simple read, but it really helps walk through where in 2021 and 22, where our culture is and the right words to use. And then on the talent pipeline, if you can go to the next slide, I can segue over right there. So the biggest thing is include people with disabilities in our business in the automotive industry. And it's from hiring to how we design and to how we make decisions. And I think Sabitha in her last presentation for touching on this too, the phrase is nothing about us without us. And it's acknowledging we cannot build accessibility into our products and services without people with disabilities along there every step of the way and paying them every step of the way. And then the kind of second thing here is to really work to remove barriers in your space, ensuring that people have equal access. It takes allies to move that forward. And it's hard to get people with disabilities if they're outside of your space into your space, unless you have champions working to bridge that divide. And then lastly, and where I want to end is the world is changing, as we all know, with the future of automotive, and we need everyone's help in finding the gaps that can help us become the most inclusive company in the world for people with disabilities.
Thank you, Alan, for that insightful presentation. I'm afraid that we're out of time. Would you be able to also share your presentation?
Yes, I'm happy to share this.
Great. Thank you. We're now going to move into our break. It's going to be a shortened break. We'd like to see you all back here at 9:45. So please refresh yourself, and we will begin our accessible mobility pitch-off sessions at 9:45, and they'll be opened by Dr. Ala Kamis, technical leader for AI and smart mobility at General Motors. We'll see you back here in about 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to invite Dr. Ala Kamis, technical leader for AI and smart mobility at GM Canada, to the screen.
Good morning, everyone. I would like just to walk you quickly through the competition track and also the judge criteria the panel of experts use in order to evaluate the submitted proposal. As you know, people with disability represent the world's largest minority, and actually it is the only minority group that any one of us can become a member of at any time. Moreover, considering temporary disability, as Alan mentioned, due to, for example, distraction or alcohol intoxication or drowsiness or fatigue or any other reason, we all suffer from some form of disability in our daily life. So this competition was initiated mainly to raise public awareness about the mobility barriers that face physically challenged individuals and early in their daily life. and also motivate students and researchers in Ontario to think and propose a user-centric solution to achieve accessible and barrier-free mobility. As you can see here, like the competition is divided into 4 tracks targeting different range of disabilities and their aging problems, such as limited or mobility impairment due to aging or disability. Another track was focusing on partial or full vision impairment, and the third track was focusing on temporary and permanent hearing impairment. That would be affecting the people in the mobility. And last track was focusing on cognition impairment and intellectual disability. Next, please. So the first edition of the competition, in this first edition, we received interesting proposals from students and researchers from different universities across Ontario. These proposals were reviewed carefully by a panel of experts based on 4 main criteria. The first criteria was focusing on originality, that reflect how novel is the proposed solution. And the second criteria was around the core of the competition, actually, is user centricity, because everything in this competition was around the design thinking question, how might we use user-centric technologies to achieve accessible barrier-free mobility. So the second criterion was about user centricity, that reflect level of utility or benefits of the proposed solution for physically challenged individual and or seniors, based on the track you are targeting. And third, we also take into consideration the execution that reflect level of practicality and feasibility of the solution. And last but not least, the usability of the solution from mainly mobility service provider perspective. Now I turn it over to Mark Bumnio, our head of CTC Academic Strategy at General Motors Canada, to introduce the judges. Back to you, Mark.
Well, let me first thank all the judges for their contributions to this event today and offering their expertise. We have 5 judges today coming on board. Dr. George Shecker is a research scientist from the University of Waterloo at the Schlegel Research Institute for Aging. We have Kat Tyrell, Manager of Automotive and Mobility Strategy at OVIN. Suzette Malek, who is the Senior Global Research Manager, Societal Trends and Innovation Insight at General Motors. Alan Hale, who we've heard from just before the break, Accessibility Strategy Manager at General Motors. And Alex Ibrahim, our Manager, Standard Development Unit and Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility. And at this point, I'd like to invite Dr. Shaker to introduce the contestants.
Okay, so team 1, you can go ahead.
All right, hello. We're a team from Queen's University, and we'd like to propose interactive dialogue technology for public spaces. Next slide, please. So major barrier we notice for the visually impaired is that our world is becoming more and more automated, and people often need to interact with automated systems with no human assistance available. For example, when buying tickets at the subway, oftentimes the only option is the ticket machine. For the visually impaired, the interfaces for these things just aren't good enough. The level of interaction you get with current audio interfaces is very limited compared to the visual interface. It's a one-size-fits-all solution that only works well if you're familiar with the machine and how it works, and don't run into any roadblocks. In order to be accessible, the systems need to both understand what difficulty a person might have run into, as well as provide interactive guidance to resolve it the way a human would. Next slide, please. So these are some of the technologies available today, but we don't think that they've sufficiently addressed the problem. Smartphones have voice assistants, but they're designed only for tasks you would do with a smartphone. You can't plug Siri into a vending machine, and it can't tell you what the options are or give you feedback if you're having difficulty finding the card slot. There's home assistive technology, but this is designed for use in the home, not in public places, and not everyone will have access to this or be able to afford it. And those that do won't have access to it outside their home. Audio feedback from existing machines is generally limited to telling the user things like insert your payment card now. This isn't helpful if you're struggling to figure out where the card slot is. So what we need is a domain-specific solution that's available to everyone. Next slide, please.
Our solution proposes the use of sensors the user can interact with to avoid reliance on visual interface. We see the following feedback loop occurring. The person will interact with the device in a manner that is received by the sensors, such as a microphone to hear what the user is saying, or a camera to collect the user's position and movements. This information will be fed through an artificial intelligence-based system, which can discern the user's intentions and what they're having difficulty with. The technology will then provide audio guidance to the user, repeating the loop where the user can then continue the interaction with the system. Ideally, the artificial intelligence system should be able to pick up on the user's level of capabilities and provide feedback accordingly, such as noticing if the user's queries suggest that they have no level of interaction with the visual interface, if they're having trouble knowing where to place an item, or if they simply want to inquire about an option presented by the visual interface. Thus, we see this as a solution for many types of users, from people with visual impairments to those who may struggle with information conveyed through writing, to those who just prefer the level of interaction they get with the cashier. Next slide, please.
To better understand this solution, we would like to explain the use case of a laundry card machine. This machine is used to top up the balance in the laundry card. This machine has multiple slots, like one for inserting the laundry card, one slot for inserting the credit or debit card, and another for inserting cash bills. Now, following the interactive dialogue technology, the machine's existing infrastructure will be equipped with an AI model, sensors, and a voice assistant. The AI model will infer user sentiments such as confidence, confusion, maybe angry, and sensors will help in detecting the user presence and calculate the user distance from the machine. The voice assistant technology will aid in communicating with the user. Now, for instance, if the user is not sure where to insert the credit card, the AI model will detect the confusion, request input from the sensor, which will estimate the user distance and pass it to the AI model. The model will then send a response to the voice assistant that speaks. Move your right hand up 10 centimeters, then insert your card in the slot. Next slide, please. This technology can be made use of at many other public places like store kiosks, ATMs, vending machines, ticket machines, and maybe even information guides in public places for navigating in a shopping mall or a building. Next slide, please. The uniform implementation of this technology can ensure ease of use without any prior training. It will be cost effective because no additional equipment or app will be required by the user. It will instill confidence in performing the daily chores by the visually impaired and ultimately boost their morale, ensuring a better quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Team 1. So let's move ahead for Team 2, presentation titled Why, and the presenters will be Willow Kong and Sophia Yi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Willa, and I'll be introducing VoIP as a proposed solution to the Accessible Mobility Challenge for Track 1. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start by talking about our motivation and objective. Human input to a computer requires fine motor control in various forms, such as a mouse and keyboard, touchscreens, and game controllers. Unfortunately, fine motor control impairment is a common side effect of injuries, health conditions, and aging. Our team wants to work on this problem as the main form of human-computer interaction clearly requires some use of the hands and fingers to operate. Next slide, please. So truly hands-free controls do exist, with the main two categories being voice controls and retinal reading, but both present their own limitations. Voice controls have privacy concerns and struggle with different languages and dialects. Retinal reading, better known as eye tracking, provides an effective means of target identification, but hands-free control implementations have also proven to be quite awkward. Clicking a button, for example, could require staring at said button for 1 or 2 seconds. Next slide, please. So we propose using a tongue as a means of human input to provide controls that shift the burden of fine motor control away from the hands. So while some projects have explored this concept, we feel that implementations in the past have been too intrusive to the user. So next slide, please. Our objective is to utilize the tongue with novel sensors and signal processing approaches to make this device as minimally intrusive to the user as possible. Next slide, please. So how does Swipe help overcome the mobility barrier? We use an advanced radar sensor to detect activity through the cheek and jaw to observe tongue movements. Then, a machine learning model running on a microcomputer can classify the tongue gestures as a computer input. With UI elements developed around simple tongue gestures, the user can input directional taps as arrow keys for navigation, directional swipes for a forward or back command, and maybe like drawing a circle on the roof of the mouth for scrolling. Next slide, please. So we can do a lot more with Swipe. Do you remember retinal reading? The limitation of that technology came from how awkward it is to input controls. We can use Swipe to augment the function of retinal reading. So retinal reading will perform target identification, and Swipe will enable the tongue gestures as input. Next slide, please. The result, a user can target a button on a screen with their eyes and click it using their tongue. Next slide, please. Of course, there are still improvements that we can make. The classifier can be improved through better model design and more training data. It can also be made more portable through battery and hardware optimizations, and the sensor location could be moved to improve ergonomics and reduce intrusiveness. Next slide. Looking forward though, Swipe could easily integrate into augmented and virtual reality or AR/VR headsets, as eye tracking is a feature that is being actively developed and integrated into newer headsets. This presents an opportunity for disability-focused design as we start to adopt AR/VR technologies. If we can make Swipe and tongue tracking as a whole a first-class input method for controlling computer in the AR/VR space, then these spaces will be inherently more disability-friendly. Next slide. Thank you for listening to our pitch.
Thank you, Team 2. Let's move ahead to Team 3. Presentation title, X Central, Harnessing Knowledge to Provide Accessibility. And the presenters are Kiana Mokrian and Austin Teshuba.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone. Today our team has decided to tackle the Track 1 challenge statement. How might we help the elderly and people with mobile impairments in the Zero Barrier Mobility Online Challenge? Next slide, please.
Hi, my name is Austin Teshuba.
And my name is Kiana Mokrian. Next slide, please.
For most of us, going out has gotten easier over the last 20 years. So let's imagine that we want to go to an Italian restaurant. Before tools like Google Maps or Yelp, finding the perfect place to go would be challenging. With thousands of options, we would rely on word of mouth or lengthy phone calls just to find a place to go. But now, with the power of technology, I can sort and filter between restaurants based on food, quality, location, reviews, and so much more with just a few clicks on my smartphone. In under 10 minutes, I wouldn't just find a place to go, I would find the best place. For most of us, technology has revolutionized the process of discovering our own cities.
Next slide, please. However, the rest of us have been left behind. So I've grown up with a brother who has cerebral palsy and is wheelchair bound, and my entire life being able to go out as a family has been difficult and quite the ordeal due to many accessibility challenges. So one story that comes to mind is the time my family and I tried to go out to dinner with my brother. After calling 5 different restaurants and finding that none of them would be wheelchair accessible, we just decided to forget the idea and go home. Despite many improvements in accessibility laws, it's crucial to know which places need to be in compliance. So planning a trip out of the house can take hours, and nothing is more disheartening than turning around and just going home. Next slide, please. Knowledge is essential to improving the mobility of those with accessibility needs, and it can even be said that knowledge itself is mobility. Next slide, please.
And that notion is the basis for our solution. Introducing Accentral, a centralized hub for accessibility information on a user-centric, easy-to-use smartphone application. Next slide, please. Accentral has three main features to make our users' lives better. The first is the ability to leave and view accessibility ratings and reviews. Unlike our main competitors, we will include ratings for many different dimensions of accessibility, like lighting levels, auditory levels, tight space warnings, wheelchair access, and more. Next, reviews aren't enough. Accentral wants to empower our users to verify accessibility themselves through objective proof. Through photos, videos, sound bites, and even virtual reality walkthroughs, our users can check for themselves if the space meets their accessibility needs. Lastly, Accentral wants to make it easy to sift through all these ratings and reviews through personalized searching and filtering. Users can search establishments by several characteristics, including the accessibility ratings relevant to them. In recent years, everyone, including the elderly, have become increasingly digitally aware. By creating an application similar to the ones that they are most accustomed to, like Yelp and Google Maps, that are specific for their unique accessibility needs, Accentral can ensure anyone who needs it can find the perfect place as fast as possible without worrying about mobility barriers. Next slide, please.
If you don't mind, could you press play on this little video? So we're just going to do a quick walkthrough of a simple wireframe of our proposed solution. Perfect, thank you. So the app employs an easy to use, legible user interface to create a more inclusive design that's simple for a myriad of users. After logging in, the user has the choice of searching for a place by name or a type of establishment. From there, the user will be able to see different options that have been narrowed down by ratings, reviews, and user-specific accessibility needs that the user will have provided to the app beforehand. Finally, the user can explore the location, check out 3D walkthroughs, pictures, videos, ratings, and reviews to see what place is perfect for them. And then once they go back, after reading through all of their reviews, back on the main screen, the users can also input reviews for other users of the app, since a key aspect of the app is gathering data for those with mobility challenges from people who understand firsthand what these challenges are. Next slide, please. So Accentral has a three-step plan to move from just an idea to an absolute game changer. So on the technical side, the mobile application will be built in React Native and made available for iOS and Android devices within just about 12 months. So accessibility features such as text-to-speech translation, different font sizes, and high contrast visuals will also be prioritized.
Then, to build a network of users, Accentral is going to begin in Toronto and focus on securing support from identified organizations who would promote our product to potential users. Accentral will also facilitate buzz marketing through live events like accessible carnivals and social media campaigns. Finally, Accentral will continually measure our success by tracking the number of Accentral users and their engagement. Next slide, please. As we mentioned earlier, going out for Kiana's brother was far from simple. However, with Accentral, it could be. Through user-centric design, Accentral has found a way to open the door to new possibilities through the power of knowledge to bring mobility equity to all. Thank you so much. We're open to any questions. Next slide.
Thank you, Team 3. Let's move ahead to Team 4. They will be presenting a LoopX autonomous delivery vehicle, and the presenter is Ben McCullough.
All right. Thank you for representing LoopX today. So let me move ahead. LoopX is developing a fleet of autonomous delivery vehicles with the goal of advancing accessibility and convenience for all through robotics. So many elderly people and people with mobility impairments are challenged on a daily basis with picking up goods for themselves, whether that be groceries, medication, or takeout food, for example. Not only is this a matter of inconvenience, but it can also prove to be an unsafe or completely inaccessible task for some individuals. That's why we've come up with a zero barrier autonomous delivery solution. With our fleet of personal delivery robots, we can pick up goods from restaurants, grocery stores, and pharmacies and deliver them directly to the customer's door. This offers an accessible and affordable solution for everyone. We've designed our delivery robot to be accessible by featuring a small form factor and low speed to be able to navigate residential areas with ease. In addition, the robot is designed to drive autonomously directly to the customer using a suite of onboard sensors. Once the robot has arrived, the user can interface with the robot using auditory and visual cues that make it easy for anyone, even those who are not familiar with advanced technology, to interface with the robot and complete their order. In the
Ben,
case of the
sorry,
robotic...
sorry to interrupt you, Ben, but your
Sure.
slides are still stuck on page 1.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I got a notification at the beginning that Zoom had crashed on me, so I'm just going to restart the sharing.
Yep.
Thank you. Great. You can see robot design.
As you started share, yeah, it's there now, yeah.
Okay, great.
We lost the slides again, by the way.
I'm sorry, but my Zoom application is crashing. Is it okay if we move on to another presenter and return to our group?
We'll just give you 1 minute if you can fix it.
Sure, thanks. Okay, you can see the screen all right now?
We can see the screen. Give it a shot.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. As I was saying, in addition to the fact that our robot can drive autonomously to the customer, we also have the ability to enable a remote operator to take over the robot's controls in the case where it needs to navigate very tight areas that are difficult for the robot to do so on its own. That ensures that it can reach its destination safely and also reach the customer directly to prevent any requirement for them to mobilize themselves to reach the robot. We've conducted ongoing testing so far, both in simulation and using our physical prototype in a variety of scenarios and weather conditions to ensure that the robot can reach the customer safely and navigate fully autonomously from the merchant to the customer's door. With our delivery platform, our users can access the service by accessing the mobile app, website, or calling by phone per their choosing to place the order. Next, we dispatch one of the mobile robots to the merchant to pick up the goods. And finally, the customer is notified via text or phone call once their delivery has arrived. And I'll just show a short video overviewing the process of the delivery. So our team is based out of Waterloo and includes Chow, Yao Dong, and myself, Ben, and we are all current engineering graduate students at the University of Waterloo. Since our founding in 2020, we've secured funding from the university to support the development of an initial prototype of our delivery robot. And by February, we plan to complete that minimum viable product. That will allow us to start a pilot project in June in Waterloo with a few partnered food service businesses to allow us to test our technology and test the delivery platform with our initial customers. Finally, by December, we plan to expand our fleet and scale up the company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. I actually recommend that you check the question posted in the QA from Biokpo and go ahead and answer it in the chat. And let's move ahead to Team 5. So our next presentation is titled Second Glance, and the presenters are Arib Khawaja and Shivalika Siro.
Hi everyone, my name is Shivalika, and together with my colleague Arib, I would like to present to you our accessible mobility project, Second Glance. We will be addressing the track to design challenge. How might we help visually impaired individuals? Next slide, please. Meet Michael. Michael was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa at the age of 10 and lost his vision by the age of 20. But Michael is a strong, independent individual who takes pride in being able to complete many tasks on his own, including reading, writing, typing, and even taking his kids for a day out, with the help of screen readers and voice-activated technology. Michael says that one of his greatest pet peeves is that society sees him as someone who needs to be served instead of someone who can also serve others. Next slide, please. Let us take you through what a normal day looks like for Michael. When Michael goes to a grocery store to pay for a few items, the cashier asks him to pay $15 in cash. And now you and I could quickly take out the money and give her the exact amount. By looking at the different bills, you could easily distinguish between a $10 bill and a $5 bill. But Michael, on the other hand, cannot identify the different denominations of bills. All the bills are the same shape and size. If he expects to get change, how would he know if he has given the right amount? Invariably, Michael hands the cashier a $20 bill and hopes that the cashier will give him the right amount. Next slide, please. Let's look at the scenario at his workplace now. Michael is slowly losing his sight because of his disease, but he doesn't want to let others at work know about his condition. And that is because he doesn't want to be doubted over his professional capabilities. And this in turn impacts Michael's mental health. He ends up losing his job and even lying on his resume while applying for new jobs. So here are some quotes from Michael. Michael says that his disability has harmed him mentally more than in any other way. He talks about doubts, assumptions, and perspectives becoming barriers to his independence. Independence is very important to Michael. Next slide, please. Can you move to the next slide? Yes. So our insights led us to ask ourselves, how might we make mobility physically and socially accessible for people with visual impairments? And we'll be following a human-centered design approach throughout our prototypes. So our solution, Second Glance, is a, next slide, please, yes. So Second Glance is a platform that helps make mobility physically and socially accessible for people with visual impairments. We accomplish this by enabling visually impaired individuals to connect with personal and professional mentors, network and find jobs, choose how to handle cash transactions, and travel independently and safely. Next slide, please. Right, so the first feature of the app is to help visually impaired people find mentors, both in their professional lives as well as in their personal lives. A mentor can be actually anyone who's willing to share his learnings and helps in overcoming mental or physical limitations. Next slide, please. So many job websites are simply inaccessible to visually impaired individuals who rely on screen readers, which might not be compatible with the web format. Second Glance will help users find their dream jobs through a job site aggregator, which takes all the jobs posted on different social media platforms and presents them in a web accessible format for these individuals, as it can be seen from our prototype. Next slide, please. The Second Glance app also uses a machine learning system to detect the currency note through the camera and inform the user through audio. Next slide, please. Using our accessible voice-activated ride-sharing feature, users can carpool with other app users in an easier manner. Next slide. With the use of our emergency alert features, user can press a button which will notify their designated loved ones of the exact location and enable them to find them. So that was a quick glance on all the features of our application. And thank you for listening to our presentation. And we hope you will give us a chance by supporting Second Glance.
Thank you, teams. I'm Suzette Malik. I'm going to be introducing the next set of presentations. We're going to start with Team 6, and it's the Indoor Spatial Mapping System. Whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name is Trim, and I'm here with my partner Bal. We're going to present to you our concept solution of the Indoor Spatial Mapping System. Before I get into the solution, let's rewind back to the problem we have in hand. Next slide, please. When we walk around, we make decisions based on what we see and hear, which is very easy for people like us. But this simple task of walking is a major problem for elderlies, as they are gradually losing or have already lost their senses, which prevent them to perceive the environment around them. Another large barrier that these individuals experience is the struggle to move around due to physical constraints, which also makes them dependent on others. This is the main reason why most elderlies have lower self-esteem. Next slide, please. There are solutions out there in the public places that help elders, such as ramps, bars, textured pavements, and especially people around to help. However, these individuals struggle most at home, where these infrastructure and services are hard to implement due to cost and inconvenience. Furthermore, these solutions still requires a lot of effort from these individuals to actually move around their home without any help. Therefore, these solutions are not what they truly need. Next slide, please.
I introduce to you the Indoor Spatial Mapping System. Our solution is primarily for indoor applications, where it maps the indoor space in high definition, substituting for the lost senses of the users. The solution contains the mapping module and the smart wheelchair module, where the mapping module utilizes data capturing devices such as cameras, thermal sensors, speakers, and microphones placed around the house to map out the indoor environment and store it onto a private server, where the wheelchair module, which is equipped with object avoidance sensors, motors, localization units to position itself in a map like a GPS, microphones, and wireless connection to connect to the map server and self-navigate indoors. Next slide, please. So imagine this is the house you want to map. Next slide, please. First, sensors are placed around the house at optimal locations to cover as much space to collect spatial data. With built-in microphones and speakers, the system can communicate with users through voice interface. If the users can't talk, the system can implement action classification to predict the user's needs through movement. Next slide, please. With the spatial data collected from the sensors, we can leverage cutting-edge technology such as object detection, feature extraction, and localization deep learning algorithms to create an accurate digital twin of the house. Next slide, please. And this map can be stored on the cloud. Next slide, please. This allows the wheelchair module to connect to the map to localize itself and navigate relative to an environment based on the action and directions from the users. Next slide, please. Our solution will bring great benefit through many applications, such as navigating safely around the house from A to B without requiring the users to walk around. With object detection capabilities, finding your car keys or any object is less hectic, reducing the time to walk around and search for items. Also, warnings for in-house hazard is more advanced with heat and image data capturing through thermal sensors and object detection. Lastly, the system can also prevent injuries before it happens with action prediction capabilities. Next slide, please.
Our solution is an in-house reflection of the way autonomous vehicles operate in the past few decades. To navigate from point A to point B, a car needs to make a plan based on the map of the environment. It also needs sensors to identify objects around it and localize itself on the map, as well as monitor road conditions to ensure a safe and efficient journey. Combination of HD maps and car sensors ensure a safe navigational stack that has been on a rise as seen in leading companies. We are extremely confident that our solution will bring great benefit to the mobility impairment individuals right here, right now, because bringing in what we have in terms of knowledge, technology, and demand into an indoor application where the environment is less duplicable and more controlled. We know that this solution is easily possible to implement. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Team 5, or Team 6, sorry about that. Next up is Team 7, which is the Sense HB network. Begin when you're ready.
So hello, my name's Benjamin Fedorik. I'm here with my friend Alden. Kai couldn't make it today. I'm going to talk to you today about the Sense HB network. It's a zero barrier air travel for people with sensory processing disorder. So throughout this presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box and Alden will get to them. Next slide, please. So SPD, or sensory processing disorder, is a disorder that many people with various other cognitive disabilities face, such as autism, ADHD, Down syndrome, etc. And these people, they face many hurdles when they're trying to use air travel specifically. So air travel, as we all know, it's a popular form of long-range transit. People with SPD often struggle in these large environments with loud noises, lots of people, such as an airport. And I'm sure anyone who's traveled recently, especially with COVID, would know that air travel is really stressful in general for all of us. These stimuli can initiate a breakdown, just putting them past that tipping point for travelers with SPD, which causes missed flights. Airlines often have to financially compensate these travelers through rebooked flights, accommodations, which obviously isn't ideal. Next slide, please. So the solution is the Sense HB network. The Sense HB network allows travelers to hear important announcements while also wearing noise-canceling headphones. So noise cancellation technology has been proven to help mitigate breakdowns in people with SPD. The Sense HB network allows travelers to equip noise cancellation while traveling in an airport. So what it does is it pipes announcements into their headphones. If they're listening to music to try and block out noise, the music will go down, the announcement will play, and then their music will return in volume. The Sense HB network also is not limited to people with SPD, but it can create a better experience for all travelers. Next slide, please. In terms of some of the technical details, I've created this flowchart. Starting off in the management layer, an announcement would make an announcer would make an announcement, maybe gate agent. It gets sent to a central server. From there, it gets distributed to dongles or distribution nodes located, spread all across the airport. And then from there, it gets sent into, using Bluetooth Low Energy, gets sent into people's devices, smartphones, smartwatches, tablets, whatever it may be, which gets piped into their headphones. Next slide, please. In terms of the originality of the Sense HB network, it's very original in the sense that Sense HB is the only preventative measure for allowing people with SPD to use air travel. So there's no proposed solutions currently which attempt to allow people with SPD to use air travel comfortably. Currently, what airports use is they use what are called sensory rooms, which are rooms where if someone's having a breakdown, they can go to calm down. But the problem is that is very reactionary. These people are still having breakdowns. We want to stop the breakdowns in the first place. So work has been done already on the feasibility of piping announcements into mobile devices, but through a visual interface, not orally. And that oral aspect is really key to help people with SPD. And like I said, the Sense HB is proactive, right? It stops the breakdowns from happening in the first place. Next slide, please. In terms of execution, the hardware for the Sense HB network is really already in place in most airports. The Sense HB network requires two physical components, distribution nodes and management nodes. The distribution nodes can take the form of existing Wi-Fi infrastructure located across the airport. And the management nodes can really make use of the announcement systems that are already in airports. So whether that be servers or just general broadcasting systems, they're already typically in place. The network could be implemented in an airport by fall of 2023, so that's only about 18 months away. Next slide, please. terms of the extensibility, although we focused on air travel, the Sense HB network is really extensible. It can be fit to many other settings and environments. We specifically focused on airports, but really you could go down many routes. You could implement this at bus terminals, train stations. You could do it at schools, large workplaces, and really my personal favorite is you could do it on board transit vehicles. So whether that's on an airplane, on a bus, on a train station, allowing to really bring this comfort to people with SPD anywhere that they're traveling. Thank you for your consideration. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the Q&A.
Thank you so much. Yes, and please do continue to post comments and questions for all the teams in the chat. Next up is Team 8 with the facial gesture recognition system for accessible driving.
Hello. Alex is sharing. So Sanjay is here with me, right, Sanjay?
Hi, Anna. Hi, everyone.
So I'm Hannah Hapunenko.
And hi, I'm Sanjay, Kyla, and Nathan.
And we're the co-founders of Accessium.
All right, so full disclosure, I know you guys probably can't tell on video, but I'm actually in a wheelchair as a result of an accident I got into many years ago. And how Accessium came to be was we're developing a technology that's helping people like me when it comes to driving. So yeah, take it away, Hannah.
So what's the problem? Imagine not being able to drive and always relying on others to get you around. This is the reality for many people with disabilities as well as for seniors. Currently, there are mechanical hand controls which will allow a driver to use one hand to control the gas and brake while the other hand controls the steering wheel. However, since both hands are always in use when driving, it's sometimes difficult or impossible to control secondary functions. So turn signals, wipers, lights. There exists a need for a driver assistance system that will allow the driver to safely and effectively control these secondary functions while they still have their hands on the primary functions on those hand controls. Allow us to introduce you to FACEIT, or Face IT, depending on how you read it, our advanced driver assistance system. Our system consists of a hardware platform coupled with artificial intelligence algorithms to ensure that the driver has the safest and most effective driving experience. Specifically, we use facial gesture recognition to activate the secondary functions of a vehicle. So if you were to wink your right eye for 2 seconds, let's say, your right turn signal could come on. This addresses one of the biggest problems by ensuring that the driver can safely and easily drive their vehicle while keeping both hands on their hand controls or on the steering wheel if they don't have hand controls. So you might be wondering, how is our technology unique when compared with our competitors?
So here are our top 3 competitors who are currently dominating the market. Not only do they offer a less effective product, but they also fail to safely mitigate the safety issue like we do. So SureGrip, for example, they use a combination of buttons and switches to activate secondary functions, and their pricing is up to $8,000. EMC offers a touchscreen interface to activate secondary functions, however, costs upwards of $30,000. Both of these technologies still require the driver to take their hands off the hand controls, which is not safe. Finally, we have Paravan, which uses voice rec to activate secondary functions and costs up to $12,000. However, it has been found that voice rec doesn't work great in a noisy environment, such as a vehicle. Accessium, we use facial gesture-based driving controls, as Hannah has mentioned, which offers high safety. You keep your hands on the hand controls, and our cost is relatively low. Pricing is up to $3,500.
So now that we've mentioned costs, let's look at our market opportunities.
So in this space, we have a total market of about 12 million drivers with physical disabilities in North America. Our addressable market is about 800,000 drivers. And of that 800,000 drivers, we hope to obtain about 5% of that market. There's other secondary markets as well, such as smart home controls, controlling hospital beds, video games, and that's worth over $10 billion, but we will not get into that right now.
So how do we plan to actually get to the market? We've already established partnerships with many key industry partners who will help us drive outbound sales. Our initial sales strategy, with the help of securing pre-orders from the beta tests that we're running right now, our initial strategy will be to sell our product through driver assessment centers. So those looking to purchase accessible tech like ours can only do so if they have the tech prescribed to them by certified occupational therapists working at these assessment centers. These drivers would buy the tech from then the mobility equipment dealers, which we will sell our product through. And we already have interest in this space and open channels by dealers for selling our product. Also, we do have a user base to help complete our beta tests at organizations like Grandview Kids and United Spinal Association. With the use of marketing and ads, demoing, and acquiring pre-orders at trade shows, we hope to acquire our obtainable market by the end of year 5. So speaking of partnerships, let's take a quick look at our team.
So on the top row, we have our core development team comprising of myself. I'm the founder and a software engineer. We have Hannah, she's a co-founder and a human factor scientist. And we have Paulo, who is our artificial intelligence engineer. And then on our bottom row, we have our advisory board members who are well-known industry experts with a proven track record. And yeah.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity. Here's just a FAQ sheet in case I'm wondering about anything. We hope that the prize money will be, well, if we win, the prize money will be a catalyst to creating safer roads and unlocking independence for millions of people. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, students, and thank you, judges. That was some amazing technologies, and we really hope that we at OVIN can continue to support you in your journey to commercialization on these technologies. Okay, so we're a little bit behind. We're about 8 minutes behind. So we'll the judges are going to need about 15 minutes to deliberate. Originally, they were to come back at 10:55, so we'll give you till 11:03 to please come back. And we'll now move on to our third presentation of the morning. Our third presentation will be given by Mahmoud Nisheli, who's a project manager for alternative energy vehicles at the CSA. And he'll discuss the CSA Group Accessibility Standardization Roadmap for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles. It'll be a 10-minute session, and that'll include the Q&A. So please, once again, if you have any questions, type them into the chat and not the Q&A session. Mahmoud, please take it away.
Thank you. So can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Thank you. So thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here and with lots of great presentation today. So I'm Mahmoud Nisheli. I'm project manager of Connected and Automated Vehicle at the Canadian Standards Associations, known as the CSA Group. And today I'm going to present one of our recent research projects regarding accessibility and standardization roadmap for connected and automated vehicles. In brief, we call it CAV, which is a very hot topic these days, and many CAV stakeholders are trying to address some of these challenges as we have in this area. So next slide, please. Okay, so first a brief introduction about CSA Group. The CSA is holding the future to a higher standard. As you may know, for over 100 years, CSA has helped make the world safer and more sustainable through testing, inspection, certification, and the development of standards. At CSA, we take a comprehensive approach to standards development. We engage in leading edge research to help inform standards content. We also provide training and education products to ensure that the standards are applied correctly. And we advocate the importance and values of standards to drive public awareness and engage a new generation of standards users. Next slide, please. So one of the main pillars of CSA activity is research. CSA Standards Research Program focuses on a broad range, and to date we have published more than 70 reports in different disciplines, all available in the CSA website, and it is free for public to reach out. So in order to support our CAV initiatives, we utilize this program to fund CAV research. As you know, CAV is new and requires lots of research and efforts. CAV ecosystem is complex and momentum is increasing, so codes and standards will play a key role in CAV advancement. Next slide, please. So the main objective of our CAV initiative is to provide requirement and specification for safe and secure CAV deployment and operation. So far, we published several research, roadmap, and industry report regarding CAV standardization. The first research was on CAV technologies, insights for codes and standards in Canada, published in 2019. The research was a critical step for us to understand the CAV standardization landscape and identify gaps and priorities for codes and standards. A follow-up research project published recently last October on physical and digital infrastructure for CAV further examined the proper framework to integrate requirements for CAV deployment in North America related to physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and cybersecurity and data security and privacy. And finally, a new research started last month to address the challenges regarding the accessibility aspects for CAV. Next slide, please. So as you know, CAV technologies hold incredible promise for a different level of flexible and accessible mobility service with better safety outcomes for all. CAVs can play an essential role in helping the elderly, person with disabilities, and those who cannot drive to stay connected with friends, family, and community and remain self-sufficient for as long as possible. However, there is a lack of relevant safety standards and codes related to the multiple areas of CAV accessibility. Therefore, we want to address some of the existing gaps in this domain and be prepared for the future. So the objective is to provide an understanding of accessibility requirements for CAV deployment and anticipated user needs. The research will help us to identify standards gap across the multiple domains of accessibility based on various accessibility categories, such as physical, perceptual, cognitive, access service, any type of mobility aids, safety and security of this part of the research. So for the methodology, we want to use combination of desktop research, industry engagement, and insights from a team of industry experts. And the research team will conduct a comprehensive scan and review of all the applicable documents, such as codes and standards, guidelines and legislation, including Canadian and international sources, to understand the technology, how it is expected to be deployed, where accessibility must be considered, and what are the accessibility requirements. And the expected outcome will provide us a guidance for advancing the codes and standards for CAV accessibility aspects in North America. So next slide, please. So for concluding, if you want to know more about our CAV activities, I encourage all to follow our CSA CAV communities space. CSA communities connect our members, stakeholders, and all users of standards from around the world and in an open and collaborative online environment. It is a community that allows you to support the standards-related activities in area that matters to you, and it is free to join. So thank you very much. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Mahmoud. First question would be, are you able to share this presentation? Are we okay if we share this?
Yeah, definitely.
So there was a question from the audience if we'd be sharing the presentations. The three presentations that have taken place so far all said yes, so we will share those. We will check in with the students and if we'll share everything that we have permission to share with the general audience. We do have a couple of minutes, Mahmoud, so I'll ask you a couple of questions here, if that's okay. How could disability organizations get involved in the CSA's accessibility research?
Yeah, this is a good question. We have, for this research, we have advisory panels. So the advisory panels are a combination of the governmental entities and some of the accessibility organizations. And these accessibility organizations could be part of this panel. And also as part of this research, we are conducting interview and we are reaching out all the accessibility organizations. And if they are interested to be part of this research, just reach out to us and we will get back to them and involve them to our research.
Great. And what's the CSA's plan after this research?
So the main thing is these, as I mentioned, the CAV ecosystem is so complex. So first of all, we need to understand the ecosystems, how we can address the standards and codes. We are doing this research to help us to better development of standards, especially for the CAV, for the accessibility perspectives. So the next step would be we are collecting all of these insights in order to help us to develop codes and standards, and hopefully that can help our stakeholders to better understanding this part.
That's great. Thank you again, Mahmoud. We're right on time now to the 8-minute delay. We're going to move into our final presentation. It's an introduction to the Skills and Career Navigator powered by the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network. And it's going to be a short presentation, a 5-minute presentation. It'll be delivered by my colleague, Amanda Sayers, who's the Director of Skills, Talent, and Workforce Development for OVIN at OCI. Amanda, please take it away.
Awesome, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Sayers. I'm the Director of Skills, Talent, and Workforce Development for the OVIN team. And I want to start by saying what a privilege it is to be a part of this event today and to witness Ontario's talented students pitch innovative, thoughtful solutions for our most vulnerable. So we can move to the next slide. All right, so I'm just going to give a brief overview of OVIN and specifically share a tool that's been created by our team for you to use during your academic and career journey. So next slide. So OVIN's core objectives include fostering commercialization, showcasing Ontario as the leader in the latest transportation technologies, driving innovation and collaboration among automotive and technology stakeholders, harnessing Ontario's regional strengths, and most importantly, leveraging and retaining Ontario's highly skilled talent and preparing Ontario's workforce for jobs of the future in the automotive and mobility sector. Next slide. So OVIN's Skills and Career Navigator tool is a centralized source of information for individuals interested in or currently working in Ontario's automotive and mobility sector. It includes a range of resources targeted to employers and other stakeholders to help build a talented automotive and mobility workforce in Ontario, equipped with the skills for jobs that are in demand now and will be in the future. It includes information related to how the sector is changing to help inform decision-making for people in the sector and those interested in automotive and mobility. It will help prospective talent identify necessary skills and available career pathways to help secure a career in the sector based on their experience and skill set. We will now take a sneak peek into how the Skills and Career Navigator works.
Welcome to the OVIN Skills and Career Navigator. Today, we will walk you through the career pathways tools on the website. From the OVIN Navigator homepage, hover over the Skills and Career Pathways tab in the navigation bar. From there, you can select either Career Pathways or Personalized Career Paths. Let's first go to Career Pathways. In Career Pathways, follow the on-screen instructions and select the profile that is most appropriate for you. For example purposes, we will select post-secondary students. Now, please choose the segment of the automotive and mobility sector that is of interest to you. Let's try Mobility Planning and Infrastructure. Now, select a career pathway that you would like to explore and learn more about. Let's try Planning and Policy. You will see a list of skills, opportunities, occupations, and relevant resources that exist in Ontario regarding planning and policy within the mobility planning and infrastructure segment of the sector. You can click on any of the drop-down buttons to access the information. Please note, this information will constantly be updated to ensure it remains relevant and accurate. If you notice something missing, please don't hesitate to contact us. Now that you have an understanding of how to navigate the Career Pathways tool, let's quickly go over the Personalized Career Paths tool. From the OVIN Navigator homepage, hover over the Skills and Career Pathways tab in the navigation bar. From there, select Personalized Career Paths. Next, please take a moment to register for a free account. Once you have registered, please follow the on-screen prompts to create your profile. After setting up your initial profile, you will land on the dashboard of your personalized career path. From here, you can complete your profile by selecting the About Me icon. If you select Careers, you will see career options based on your work experience, or you can use the search and filter options to select something that interests you. Here, you can see a few career paths we think you may like. You can see how transferable your current skills are for a specific career, along with the average pay and how in demand the job is. If you do like one, you can click on Select and then click Next. Here you will see the beginning of your personalized path take shape. You can see which skills you still need to work on, and if you believe you already have some of these skills, you can simply add it by clicking on it to update your skills profile. If you continue to scroll down, you will see learning and training programs that have been recommended to develop your skills and knowledge to obtain the career you are interested in. From there, you can either learn more about the program by selecting View, or save the program to monitor progress by selecting Track. Finally, if you scroll to the end, you will see our resources section that will contain content to help you prepare for the job market. We strongly recommend checking out the learning, resources, and work pages as well. You have the ability to access content, resources, and jobs based on the profile you created in the beginning. Now that you have learned how to navigate your personalized career path, we'll let you get back to exploring.
So our recent launch of the Skills and Career Navigator with the Talent Strategy Roadmap is just the beginning of a transformative journey for the automotive and mobility sector. I hope today's demonstration was useful and you can set aside some time in the near future to explore OVIN's Navigator. Next slide. Thank you very much for having me today, and best of luck to all the students from the entire Skills, Talent, and Workforce Development team at OVIN.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I'd now like to bring the judges back to the stage if they are ready. Mark Boismonu will announce the judges and ask them to announce the finalists. Mark, are you available?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, I think our judges have finished deliberation, and we shall announce the winners. Just want to say that it was a tight race. There was a lot of very good presentations, a lot of very good ideas, and thank you all for the contributors and the teams. Let me pass it over to Alex, who will announce the third and second place winners. Alex.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Alex Abraham. I'm manager for Standards Development Unit at the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility. I just wanted to say everybody here did such a fantastic job. You've all shown such ingenuity and particular care to the issues that persons with disabilities care about and the problems that they face, and taking an honest effort in solving those problems. So in third place, we have Team 7, which is the Sense HB Network. So congratulations to you and your team. And in second place, we have Team 8, which was Accession. Congratulations to your team as well. I'll now be passing it over to Alan to talk about the first place.
Thank you, Alex. And yeah, to echo what Alex said, it actually took quite a bit of discussion to make sure we had it straight on the winners, because there were so many amazing projects today. And so we want to encourage everybody to stay in this space and continue innovating. But it's with great pleasure I'd like to announce our first place winner is Team 3, Accentral. So congratulations, Asa and Kiana.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's great. Congratulations again to everybody. My name is Kat Searle. I'm manager of automotive and mobility strategy with the OVIN team, and I'm going to be delivering some closing remarks for this today's event. So I just wanted to say, first of all, wow, what a really, just such a fantastic pitch off. I had the pleasure of serving as one of today's judges as well, and I have to say the decision was not easy. It was really challenging to come to these winners and to select the finalists last week. So really well done to everybody. You could tell each of the teams put in so much work, empathy, and creativity into the proposed solutions, and we really hope to see all the teams continue to work on these ideas, listen to the end users, and explore how they can best get all these solutions into the hands of those that need them. A huge congratulations again to the winning teams. I'd like to thank each of today's speakers for sharing their insights and expertise on the topic, and to the rest of the judges for going through each of the submissions in detail last week and joining today in support of selecting the final 3 winning teams. We couldn't have done it without you. It's been a pleasure working with our partners at GM on this important event. A special thank you to the whole team over there for supporting this very important initiative. I'm now going to pass it over to Terry Austin, who is Senior Engineering Leader at General Motors Canada, to provide closing remarks on behalf of GM.
Thank you, Kat. So hello, everyone. Once again, my name is Terry Austin. I'm the Senior Manager for Innovation at the Canadian Technical Centre here at GM of Canada. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone in our building, CTC, especially Dr. Alakamis for coming up with the idea, initiating the competition. And I'd like to thank our partners at OVIN, Ontario Autonomous Vehicle Innovation Network. Really, without you, you brought it to life. So thank you very much. I'd also like to thank our industry experts who volunteered their time and expertise to judge the submissions, as well as our keynote speakers. And most importantly, thanks to the students for your creative ideas. Today, we saw proof of concepts, we saw cloud ideas, crowdsourcing, we saw wireframes, gamification, marketing proposals, business cases, and artificial intelligence. It's amazing. I think I speak for all of us when I say that we'll leave here today feeling inspired to do more. At GM, we're striving to be the most inclusive company in the world, as you heard from Alan and our leader, Mary Barra. That's why conversations like these matter. It's critical that we raise awareness about the mobility barriers that face physically challenged individuals and the elderly in their daily lives. Your pitches today identified some really innovative, user-centric solutions that help empower people to break through mobility barriers. It's awesome when we see policy, industry, and academia all aligned on this. With that, we know that the wind is at our backs. And so, but it is up to all of us to come together and tackle these challenges together. For GM, this extends beyond our own employees to include our products and the way our customers interact with them. That's why we're committed to our vision of a world with 0 crashes, 0 emissions, and 0 congestion. We truly believe that self-driving vehicles will have enormous benefits for society in the form of increased safety and access for transportation. Imagine the peace of mind knowing that whatever your age, your stage of life, or physical capabilities are, you have the freedom to go anywhere and everywhere you would like. Self-driving cars take the focus off the driver, as we don't need to worry about the steering wheel or pedals. Instead, we can turn our attention to the comforts of the passenger, including those who are visually or physically impaired, and put the emphasis on catering to their needs and comfort. We're closer to this future than you may think. In fact, our team at Cruise completed the first fully driverless rides to the public in San Francisco just last week. Put simply, our self-driving vehicles will improve access to mobility for those who currently cannot drive due to age, disability, or otherwise. I truly believe that this generation has the ambition, the talent, and the technology to realize a safer, cleaner, and better world that we all want. Today was proof of that. So thank you for taking the time to support this important initiative. It's incredibly exciting to be working in the automotive industry as the path before us opens to be more inclusive and innovative than ever before. Congratulations to our winners from Team 3, Accentral. So please take care, be safe, and stay positive and test negative. Thank you very much.